Now, President Muhammadu Buhari has said that the partial closure of Nigeria's borders was not meant to punish neighboring countries, but to strengthen the country's security and economy.
He noted that Nigerian farmers have been celebrating the closure of the borders, which had drastically reduced smuggling of agricultural products, as well as arms and ammunition infiltration. While some Nigerians are very grateful for the closure of the border, lamenting over the prolonged closure, which began last year.
Well, however, multiple reports suggest the border closure across Nigeria seems to be more effective in the south and somehow difficult to enforce in the northern part of the country, especially in the northeast, where Boko Haram insurgents have continuously filtrated. Well, joining us now from our Abuja studios on Nigeria's prolonged border closure is Andover UTSAHA, a public affairs analyst and former Social Democratic Party governorship aspirant in Benue State, North Central Nigeria. Thank you so much, Mr. UTSAHA, for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let me just go ahead and ask my question. I want to begin by saying that a recourse to history globally has shown that protectionist industrialization policy, such as driven by border closure, is nothing new. So what Nigeria is doing now is not really new. But in evaluating what President Muhammadu Buhari's administration did in August last year, would you say that the border closure has been successful as the government is touting it to be?
Well, thank you very much for that question. For me, I would say it's difficult to say. It's not a one-off question or a one-off answer that you say, this is what has happened. I would rather have indices, specifically targeting issues that were pre-planned before the closure took effect. For instance, I know the government would always tell you that there has been an increase in the revenue generation from customs. I agree. But beyond that, was that the only reason? Has the internal crisis gone down in such a way that you would say there's no more influx of small weapons and machinery? Is it possible for you to say that enterprises have grown within this period? You know, you have to benchmark it by specific set indices. And that is why, if you recall, when I came here the last time, I kept talking about holistic approach to these issues. There must be milestones specifically set out. I would agree with the government that yes, there has been an increment in the generation from custom. I will agree, like I read somewhere, that perhaps there have also been a reduction in the local consumption of PMS in Nigeria because of the closures. But was that all why it was set up? Has it improved in our security? I doubt. Has it impacted on entrepreneurs? Yes, I would say so. So if you mark out specific indices, perhaps you would say the government is right, but I will add by saying that we could actually achieve more than we currently have achieved.
Mr. UTSAHA, I remember when we spoke a couple of months back, I mean, this were the indices, you were quite very bullish about the border closure. But you have looked at various dimensions to this, the security dimension. And let me remind you, only recently, we've stopped the proliferation of small arms, but only recently, we had the beheading of the chairman of CAN at Michika local government area. A lot of people will say you've had attacks too, you know, by the Boko Haram insurgents. And pretty much the reason for closing this border was the fact that it funnels through. But some people will say the integrity of the customs authorities, another thing to call to question. There was a report recently about how easy it is to get into Nigeria if you pay, was it 200 naira thereabout? I mean, what can you say as regards this vis-a-vis the quest, you know, to secure our borders?
Well, like I was discussing with somebody yesterday, I'm of the opinion that the border closure, to a large extent, is a reactive measure. It's not a proactive measure. We are reacting to issues that have happened, issues that are still happening. We have not really, we didn't sit down and say, hey, we're going to use the border closure to achieve this and this. What we've basically done is we're going to use the border closure to stop this and that. So to me, there's very little you can gain. The border closure, for instance, assuming it happened when Libya was falling, when there was crisis in Mali, and particularly our borders in the north were effectively shut, it would have checked the influx of these small arms and weapons. But we went to sleep until we did this just about last year. So most of these things are already within the country. Perhaps what it may be doing, if it is doing, is stopping further inflow of these unlicensed weapons. But be that as it may, there have been complaints as to the effectiveness of this border closure. I give you an instance, Honorable Fatuha, who represents Daura, Sandamu, and Meadua Federal Constituency, complained about the hypocrisy of the customs. And he made it at the floor of the House, that these closures are not effective. So this is the challenge. I think we are, to a large extent from what we are doing here, just subsidizing the inefficiencies of the custom with this border closure. But we have some gains from it. The gains may be accidental, but they have impacted us positively. So if I'm a progressive-looking government, I would say, how do we ensure that these gains are actually sustained and built continually? Otherwise, you ask yourself, how long are we going to keep the borders closed? I remember you asked me this question the last time. I couldn't answer it. I'm sure this government too cannot answer it. That's my challenge.
Yes, Mr. Anuex, permit my voice, I'm a bit under the weather. You just basically asked my next question. You know, the first time this came on board, the government said that the border was going to be opened on January 31st. However, the administration has come out to say that it's going to be indefinite until the committee set up submits their recommendations and it's reviewed and approved by the presidency. Now, I want to know what your recommendations are. What should the government be doing in the meantime, now that the border is closed, so that once it's open, it's not returned to the status quo that we are all used to?
I think the first question we need to answer is, are we going to open the borders? Do we want to open our borders? And the answer is yes, because we are not self-sufficient. But then the next question is, when do we open our borders? If you look back from my experience between when the borders were closed to this point, I have noticed that there has been a positive impact on rice production, for instance. I've seen small-scale enterprises who are into rice grow up and blossom. So the question is, the government really needs to come to the drawing board and draw out the indices and say, this must be achieved, or when we achieve this, we do that. You remember we signed an agreement in Africa to open up our borders for trading. We should look at the implication of that, even though perhaps it's going to take effect from July. The question now is, what do we really want to achieve with this? I read one of the conditions given, which to me is okay. We should make sure that all the warehouses built along the Nigerian borders are demolished completely. I agree. We've had, like Dangote also mentioned, rogue neighbors who would do everything within the ambits of their own spaces legally, but at the same time adversely affecting us negatively. For instance, why would a ship want to bring stuff from Europe and then bet in Cotonou, in Benin, or in Togo? Why not come to Nigeria? And then you pay duty there, and then these countries create a safe haven for smugglers to move these things to Nigeria, and we lose our duty. You know, the government, I said it before, it's not a decision that should be taken by the executive alone. And when I say government, I'm actually alluding to also the legislature. It should be looked at, I use my word again, holistically.
Mr. Tasa, let me bring in the recently signed AFCFTA into all of this because it's to go operational.
Exactly.
And it's in view. Do you think that this, puts the Nigerian government on the spot when you consider that we barely signed and then closed our borders? Is it a sign of loss of confidence in the Nigerian government on the continent? What's your view in all of that?
Well, for me, I would say it is not necessarily a loss of confidence. Perhaps, to some extent, we won't run away from it. To some extent, there is some element of ego tripping here, trying to show what we are capable of doing. And it is not completely wrong. I mean, we saw it in the US and the Iran crisis recently. You need to show some force occasionally. But beyond that, what do you intend to achieve? I feel we cannot compete competitively with many of our neighbors who are into production, who have the wherewithal, the infrastructure to actually be competitive in pricing in terms of production. For instance, and this is what I keep saying, when you close your borders, you say to yourself, hey, let's develop our capacity in-house so that by the time we open our borders, we'll not end up being a dumping ground. I can assure you that if we open our borders today, perhaps only rice may be competitive within Africa. Maybe, I doubt. But for all the other factors that require good roads, electricity, which are issues you cannot take for granted in terms of production, processing, we would not be able to compete competitively. Personally, I had an issue with going ahead to sign the agreement. And that was the reason why when we eventually signed it in Niger, the whole of Africa was jubilating. Perhaps with the thinking that eventually they had gotten the African dumping ground to sign into this agreement so that every other thing can get dumped on us.
Okay.
I think for once, let the government look at what it holds or what these opportunities hold for enterprises that are local. I commend the government on these NIRSAL loans with the central bank, wherein entrepreneurs are empowered to actually blow their businesses. I mean, I just did a training recently with one of the licensed training organizations.
Mr.
And there was
UTSAHA, we're
something
going
I
for a break
discovered there
soon.
that was very beautiful to me.
You can land on that point. Just to inform you,
There's a
we're going
platform where
for a break soon.
you do business within. Okay.
Okay. You'll come back and land on that point. We're going for a break real soon, but I just wanted to put, two questions on the front burner. Number one is going to be the increasing inflation rate as a result of the border closure, and two, the recent skirmish Nigeria had with some other francophone countries that were so quick to go and change the CFR to the ECHO, to be able to meet us there before we transfer to that currency. And it was as a result of the border closure. We'll go for a quick break now. We'll come back and talk about all of that. But you also finish on that point you started before about the training for businesses. All right, in case you're just joining us, still the morning show here on the Rise News. I was asking a question before, but I want you to finish with the school of thought you were trying to put out before. I asked two questions. I talked about border closure as regards, the inflation rate. It's gone up now. It's about 11.98%. Also, I talked about, the political implication of border closure. There's been squabbles in Ghana against Nigerian traders and the likes. In fact, there are also strong indications that because of this and because of the effect on, the francophone-speaking African countries that spend the CFR, when President Macron came to Abidjan, they were so quick, to quickly adopt the proposed monetary union of West African states, that's the ECHO, turn their CFR to ECHO, to be able to cut off Nigeria from all of this. And Ghana supported them as regards this. So what's your take on these two questions? But finish up with where you started first.
For me, Ghana is acting or taking steps towards ensuring that whatever she does benefits her people. There's a law in Ghana, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center Act, 865, Section 27, Sub 1, limits the kind of businesses, for instance, that foreigners can get into. And in some cases, it's emphatic that Nigeria and China are placed on the same pedestal. Restrictions on them. Retail businesses, certain levels of production. Ghana is doing all of this to protect her people. So Ghana does not really have what it takes to complain. Yes, like you mentioned, they supported the move by the francophone countries. They're looking at how it impacts on them. If Nigeria opens borders and Ghana can also dump on us, they'll be happy. Only a few days ago, the president complained about the impact on the country, their country. And for me, the political implication, we have been reduced inadvertently to becoming a nation where people call big for nothing. Because we have the population, we have the market, and anything gets dumped on us. So for the political side, I support what this is. For the economic, if it is looked beyond some of the avenues or the vistas we are looking at, it's very beautiful. It you know, like I said earlier on, everybody celebrated when we signed into it. It's like a setup against us. Look at Nigeria. Nigeria is surrounded by francophone countries. They know exactly what they want to achieve. So I would not be bothered about. In fact, if you ask me if it gets to the worst, even the AFT, CTA, we pen down. We'll need to review it if it comes to the worst and it has a negative impact on our entrepreneurs at home. And I see it going that way. Let us grow our own. We just increased the VAT in the new Finance Act to 7.5. If we grow our enterprises and they are remitting VAT, it will increase on our income. And it will provide more money for government to do the infrastructural development she so wishes to do. That's my thinking.
Okay, Mr. UTSAHA. Now I want to ask you this. Apart from the fact that a lot of people believe that the border closure goes against the spirit of the ACFTA, it also goes against the spirit of ECOWAS, which has had a long-standing agreement with 44 long-year African countries. Now, people have said that because of this, now the failure of neighboring countries to fulfill their obligations under ECOWAS, whereby they're not able to properly make sure that what gets into Nigeria is properly filtered, would you say that Nigeria is actually defending herself and making sure that she's protecting herself according to what the president has also said?
Without mincing words, I would say yes, Nigeria is protecting herself. But I will only add, say Nigeria can do more than protect herself. She can protect herself and build herself. Okay. Without mincing words.
All right, definitely. I agree. Now, Adisua was going to go to
yes, let me come here, Mr. UTSAHA, because you've talked about, you know, building on this success that the administration is touting, even though you say there are some negative effects. What should be the priority in trying to maintain this success, even when and if we do open the borders again? What should be the priority? What will give us the better equilibrium to improving manufacturing, perhaps?
We should put in place those things before even thinking about opening the border. We agree that only our land borders are currently closed, so we still have the seaports open. Anything that wants to come in should still come in through the seaport. But I mean, we need to develop economic hubs. Like I was mentioning earlier on, I did a training on enterprise development. I had a business plan I was going to work on. But then some of the threats arise from the fact that we work singly and independently. We need to create hubs. For instance, in Benue, we have a lot of yams. Do we have a hub for value promotion, value addition for yam production? Rice, you have it in some other locations. Kebbi is doing well. I heard recently that even Kebbi wanted to set up a tomato paste company that will cut drastically the imports. We must be deliberate about creating these hubs. Light, electricity is non-negotiable because what we have currently as our output cannot make us an industrialized nation. So it's really a tall order. If you ask me, if you want to go into putting the infrastructure in place, perhaps the borders will remain closed until even at the end of the dispensation of this government. So what do I advise? Like I said before, border closure should not be an independent topic discussed on its own like we are doing here. Border closure should be a subtopic being discussed either under the National Development Plan or National Economic Transformation Plan or whatever we call it, so that it is holistic. It is not an end in itself. It's supposed to be a means to an end. And so we must factor in all the other attributes. You know, our transportation, movement of goods from one point to the other, movement of raw materials and the rest. We have a whole lot to do. What we are doing now is what we would have been doing 30, 40 years ago. But it's not too late to start now. That's my thinking.
Mr. UTSAHA, a lot of people argue and say, couldn't technology have been used to block these loopholes? Because the reason why these borders were closed was because there were loopholes. So a lot of people will say, couldn't technology have been used? Maybe proper surveillance, like drones and the likes, you know, to be able to gather this and block these loopholes. Before now, shouldn't we have explored that and invested heavily in that, because you would see that despite even the returns the customs makes for this country, we've not had really major investment. You go to the airport, you hardly get the scanners working, and you can just imagine what goes on at the land border. And secondly, I'll ask, there's a lot of focus on rice, but when you look at it, it might not look as though rice is the real cash cow. I mean, there are some other products that might be the real cash cow. What are the other products we should be focusing on? I mean, you talked about the anchor boraskin. There's a lot of focus on rice. How can we decongest this focus from rice?
Okay, I'll take the first one. I agree with you completely. Technology would have solved this very easily. The same way the United Nations, the US deployed a drone from over 7,000 miles to hit targets in Iran. Technology can do this, but in all of this, I see a deliberate attempt at creating an opportunity for some people to enrich themselves. Like I mentioned about the Honorable the last time, because borders are closed, there's a premium on you passing through the borders. You know, whenever you tend to rely on human factors alone, it has a way of providing an opportunity for some people, dubious people, to make monies of it. I think there's a need to really critically look at what our customs is doing on that part. Otherwise, I agree with you. I mean, completely, technology will take care of this. Rice, I've been thinking of it too. Why is the focus so much on rice? Because virtually every family wants to take in rice. There are various alternatives. Perhaps it has to do with the ease with which rice can be cooked or prepared for consumption in the homes. But I agree, and the last time we talked about it, we need to get exactly where our strengths, particularly in agriculture, are. Once we get those strengths, we focus on them. We cannot, this is my thinking, be an island on our own. And we cannot, in the course of trying to be self-sufficient, now disregard what some of our neighbors around can also benefit. I believe there should be some element of mutual benefit in so doing. But if you ask me where we move from rice, what do we go to? I remember, if it was not Obasanjo's government, it was President Goodluck Jonathan, talked about replacing, about the cassava bread. The problem we have in all of this, and it's what I said earlier on, is the fact that we don't have a continuous policy project. If for instance, all of these were warehoused within a national development plan, we'll have a periodic review milestone that tells us where we are doing well or we are not doing well. It's difficult for me to sit down here and tell you exactly, do this, do that, don't do this. That's the reason why you need two good heads to sit down and review this thing beyond the one head, which is the executive that we currently have. That's my thinking.
And finally, just before we go, Mr. UTSAHA, a month after, do you think that Nigeria has sent a strong message to her neighbors who have perpetrated this, some would say, very evil act of, pushing products and commodities through our borders?
That's purely political, and I would say it couldn't have been any stronger. We have sent a very strong message, but it's purely for our bragging rights, our ego, and for our political considerations. Let's look at the economic too, in-house.
Many thanks for coming on the show, Mr. Andover UTSAHA, public affairs analyst and governorship aspirant of the Social Democratic Party in Benue State.